Olive trees. In a quaint little town on the Mediterranean coast, olive trees played an essential role in the lives of its inhabitants. The town was surrounded by vast olive groves that had been there for generations. These trees weren't just plants, they were a symbol of heritage, love, and community. Jamie, a young boy of 12, had grown up hearing stories about the magical olive trees from his grandmother. She told tales of how the oldest tree in their grove was planted by his great-great-grandfather and had been the silent witness to countless family memories. One day, as Jamie wandered through the grove, he stumbled upon a tree that looked different from the rest. Its leaves shimmered in a peculiar shade of gold, and the trunk had inscriptions that seemed ancient. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to decipher the writings. He spent days researching and finally discovered that the inscriptions were a forgotten dialect. With the help of old books and manuscripts, Jamie translated the message, which read, "To those who care for these trees with love and respect, good fortune will always come." Jamie was excited and shared his discovery with his family and the townsfolk. The story spread like wildfire, and the olive grove became a place of respect and reverence. Everyone in town started to care for the trees more diligently. They celebrated the annual harvest festival with even more enthusiasm, ensuring that no tree was harmed and every olive picked was done so with care. As years went by, the town prospered. The olive oil they produced became famous for its purity and flavor, fetching them good prices. Tourists flocked to see the magical olive tree with the golden leaves. Jamie's discovery didn't just bring prosperity, it strengthened the bond of the community and reminded everyone of the importance of respecting nature. And as Jamie grew older, he made sure to pass down the story of the olive trees to the younger generation, ensuring that the message of love, respect, and community lived on. Perfect life of John. John had always been a simple man. He lived in a cozy apartment in the heart of the city, had a job he loved, and a cat named Whiskers who kept him company. To outsiders, John's life might have seemed mundane, but to him, it was perfect. Every morning, John would wake up at 6 a.m. to the sound of his alarm clock. Instead of snoozing it like most people, he would jump out of bed with enthusiasm. The first thing he did was feed Whiskers, who would be waiting impatiently at the foot of his bed. After that, he'd make himself a cup of coffee and sit by the window, watching the city come alive. John worked as a librarian at the local library. He loved books and enjoyed helping people find the perfect read. His colleagues adored him for his cheerful nature and the fresh pastries he would bring every Monday. During lunch breaks, John would visit the park across the street. He'd sit on his favorite bench, enjoy a sandwich, and watch kids play, couples walk hand in hand, and birds chirping away. It was his little daily escape. In the evenings, after returning home, he'd cook himself a simple meal, often sharing some with Whiskers. Then, he'd settle down with a good book or watch a classic movie. On weekends, John had a routine too. Saturday mornings were reserved for cleaning and laundry. In the afternoon, he'd visit the local farmer's market to buy fresh produce. Sundays were for longer walks in the park, visiting the local museum, or meeting a friend for coffee. Now, some might think, didn't John ever want more from life? The answer is, he did. But for John, these little moments, routines, and simple pleasures were his more. He believed in finding joy in everyday moments, and that's precisely what he did. Years went by, and John grew older, but his zest for life remained unchanged. Whiskers got a bit slower, and the routines adapted slightly, but the essence remained the same. One day, a young neighbor asked him, "John, don't you ever wish for a different life? A life full of adventure and excitement?" John smiled, looked out of his window, and replied, "Young one, I've had my fair share of adventures and excitement in these everyday moments. For me, this is the perfect life." And that's the story of John, a man who found perfection in simplicity and joy in daily routines. An unsolved case, the murder of King. In the small town of Larksville, everyone knew everyone. Life was peaceful, and the biggest news was usually about Mrs. Thompson's new pie recipe. However, everything changed one fateful morning when the town's beloved dog, King, was found lifeless in the park. King wasn't just any dog. He was a majestic golden retriever who belonged to the town's mayor, Mr. Anderson. Every day, King would playfully greet the townspeople, wagging his tail and barking joyfully. Children loved him, and he was often seen chasing butterflies in the park. When news spread about King's death, the entire town was in shock. Who could do such a terrible thing to such a loving creature? The local police, Officer Daniels and Officer Lucy, took on the case. They started by questioning the people who were in the park the previous evening. Mrs. Thompson, who often took evening strolls, recalled seeing a stranger feeding King something. But it was dark, and she couldn't see his face clearly. The next clue came from young Tommy, who found a half-eaten meat pie near where King was discovered. Mrs. Thompson confirmed it wasn't one of her pies. The officers decided to send the pie for testing. The results showed traces of poison. Now, with evidence in hand, the officers increased their efforts. They put up posters around town with a sketch of the stranger Mrs. Thompson had seen. Days turned into weeks, but no leads came. One evening, Officer Lucy decided to visit the town's only diner. As she sipped her coffee, she overheard a conversation. A man was talking about leaving Larksville because of the silly dog drama. Curious, Lucy approached him, and soon, under her persistent questioning, the man confessed. His name was Derek, and he was a rival politician from a neighboring town. He believed that by removing the beloved King, Mayor Anderson's popularity would decline, giving Derek's associate a chance in the upcoming elections. Derek was arrested and faced justice for his cruel act. The town was in mourning, but they also united, showing that love and community spirit always triumph over evil intentions. The park where King played was named King's Memorial Park, ensuring his memory lived on forever. Ecological destruction. Sarah was an ordinary girl living in the bustling city of Newville. Like most people in the city, she was so caught up in her daily life that she barely noticed the tall buildings, busy streets, and very few trees. However, everything changed one summer day when she went on a trip to her grandmother's house in the countryside. As soon as Sarah arrived at her grandmother's village, she was taken aback by the vast green fields, tall trees, and the fresh air. Birds were singing, and the sky seemed bluer than she ever remembered. One day, while Sarah and her grandmother were walking in the woods, they came across a place where many trees were being cut down. There were big machines, loud noises, and the once serene forest was now filled with chaos. "Why are they cutting down the trees, Grandma?" Sarah asked, with tears in her eyes. Her grandmother sighed. "It's called deforestation, dear. People cut down trees to make space for buildings or to use the wood for various purposes. But they don't realize that trees are essential for our environment." Sarah looked at the fallen trees and felt a deep sadness. "But trees give us oxygen, and they are home to so many animals," she said. "Yes," her grandmother replied. "And when they are gone, it affects everything. The climate changes, animals lose their homes, and the balance of nature is disturbed." Sarah felt a strong urge to do something. She decided to start with small steps. After returning to the city, she began planting small plants in her balcony. She talked to her friends and teachers about the importance of trees and started a small group to plant trees in their neighborhood. Soon, their efforts were recognized, and more people joined in. They approached the local government and got permission to convert a piece of wasteland into a community garden. Over time, their garden became a haven for birds, butterflies, and even small animals. Sarah realized that even though ecological destruction was a significant problem, every small effort counted. And if everyone took small steps, it could lead to a big difference. She hoped that one day, cities like Newville would be as green and vibrant as her grandmother's village.